AEW aired its first empty arena show, its first empty arena Dynamite in Jacksonville on Wednesday from Daly's Place. I did a live stream after the show, went 2.5 hours, including all your phone calls. And AEW did something that WWE failed to do with its own empty arena shows. They knocked it out of the park with one of their best shows of the year. They made the best of a bad situation, and they delivered what I thought was a very entertaining 2 hours. I haven't checked the final results of the Twitter poll, but it was probably the widest margin of a positive result for an AEW poll since I started putting them up. Last I checked, it was around 89 or 90% positive, with something like 3,000 or 4,000 votes in. A big advantage that they had over WWE was having a bigger venue than the Performance Center. The Performance Center is basically a glorified warehouse. I mean, if you look at it and you listen with nobody there, to the echoes and everything, it's like they're performing inside of a warehouse. Now, it's a very fancy warehouse. It's a $5 million warehouse, but it's a small, relatively small building. And here, because they were in Daly's Place, and Daly's Place is not exactly a gigantic venue either, but compared to the PC, it's a big building, and they were able to have pyro, and they put wrestlers in the first few rows of the crowd, spaced out accordingly so that they, weren't all condensed together, social distancing, so they had plenty of room to spread them out. You had MJF in the crowd, Shawn Spears, Tully Blanchard, Wardlow, Joey Janela, Colt Cabana. They were all around ringside throughout the show, cheering and booing and making noise, and that noise helped a lot. If you have an empty arena, you need to create noise somehow. At the PC, you can hear the ceiling fans. You can hear the production people. Go back and watch the very end of SmackDown as they were going off the air with Goldberg and Roman Reigns going face to face. And you can hear them, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was Kevin Dunn or somebody else. In someone's headset, it was coming through on TV, telling them, go to this camera angle, this camera angle, this camera angle. And that was coming through. It was so silent. It was so quiet in there. It was coming through on TV. I mean, they cut it out of the YouTube video. But I thought that was actually kind of funny. But yeah, if you've got an empty arena, if you've got an empty building, you've got to find a way, what I think we have realized these last couple of weeks, you've got to find a way to create noise. And I thought AEW did a far more effective job at doing that than WWE did. Now, the other smart thing that they did was they used a hard camera view of the ring with the rampway and the tunnels in the background, the heel tunnel and the babyface tunnel. You saw that if you were watching on TV on Wednesday night in the background, instead of shooting it in a way where the audience at home saw nothing but empty chairs in the background. That was smart of them to shoot it that way. Tony Schiavone was there. He was interviewing people throughout the night. He was the designated interview correspondent, and MJF was at ringside. He was betting on the matches with Shawn Spears. They had Jim Ross, Taz, and Excalibur on commentary. And they were very loosey-goosey. They were having a good time. JR and Tony were kind of ribbing each other at one point. And the show was really highlighted by two big debuts, including the long-awaited reveal of the Exalted One of the Dark Order, who turned out not to be Matt Hardy, but Brody Lee, the former Luke Harper, who would have been debuting in his hometown of Rochester had they not been forced to move the show. They laid out SCU. Now we get to see what Brody Lee can do as the leader of his own faction instead of being a follower in one. Does he have the chops to make it work? Or was Vince McMahon right all along? We're about to find out. When he told Christopher Daniels, "You're not the first out-of-touch old man not to believe in me, but you're damn sure going to be the last," that was such a money line. I love that. I also love the Jake Roberts-Lance Archer vignette out in the woods, with Archer beating up random scrubs in a ring in the middle of nowhere while, Jake is just lounging back in a lawn chair, or whatever kind of chair it was, smoking a cigarette, just watching. And then at the end of the show, after the Inner Circle won the man advantage over the Elite in their upcoming Blood and Guts match, they certainly wanted you to think that it was going to be Jon Moxley taking the place of the injured Nick Jackson, tagging with the Elite for the Blood and Guts match. But instead, we see Vanguard 1 hovering overhead, and then up in the cheap seats, there's broken Matt Hardy to close out the show. And it will be Matt Hardy tagging with the Elite against the Inner Circle in the Blood and Guts match. It sucks that they couldn't have done this in front of a packed crowd, because the reaction for this would have blown the roof off the place. But I thought they handled it as well as they could. You know, AEW made those WWE shows at the PC feel inferior by comparison. I mean, they're working within the confines of what they have to work with, you know, in that building. But so far, they have chosen to fill time, WWE has, by airing an entire Royal Rumble match and a WrestleMania match from 6 years ago. Raw on Monday night had exactly one match in the ring. NXT had no matches, but Raw had one match. They did a better job, at least on Friday night. They had more matches. But there is no excuse for AEW to be able to go out and put on a show like this and have WWE put on those shows by comparison. There's no excuse. It's like they weren't even trying. Now, if they insist on doing more shows from the PC, they need to learn from what AEW did, because if this is the way these shows are going to be every week, look, Raw and SmackDown are going to do a lot more viewers than AEW does. We know this. They are established shows. You know, Raw and SmackDown have been on the air a long time. WWE is very fortunate to have a very loyal base of fans that will watch no matter what, through thick and thin. Even through a plague. They will watch Raw, they will watch SmackDown. Now, look, it helps to have Stone Cold Steve Austin announced for the show, or John Cena, or Goldberg. I'm sure that's a big part of why they've been able to hold on, you know, to their audience in the last few weeks. They've promoted some big names. They had Edge come back on Monday night, Undertaker. So it helps. It helps to kind of throw the big guns out there. But they're very fortunate to have a very dedicated, very loyal base of fans. We already know Raw and SmackDown, they're going to just demolish AEW when it comes to the numbers on TV. But if I were a new viewer tuning in to these shows, I would be far more inclined to want to watch AEW than I would WWE after what I've seen the last 2 weeks. Now, even though they were promoting the Blood and Guts War Games match for the next, quote-unquote, next episode of Dynamite, they never said next week, because things are changing every day. We don't know from one day to the next what kind of restrictions or bans may be announced to where they're just simply not allowed to run shows anymore. But it appears their plans have changed, because the next episode of Dynamite is going to be this Wednesday back at Daly's Place in Jacksonville. But it will not feature the Blood and Guts match. Tony Khan announced the following on Friday. This is what Tony Khan said. He said, our goal every week with AEW Dynamite on TNT is to produce great shows for our fans, and I believe we do. We felt especially motivated to serve our audience on Wednesday given what the world is coping with, and hopefully we gave them a well-deserved escape during these trying times. Everyone at AEW is very proud of what we delivered and humbled by the response. We plan to continue answering that calling with live weekly shows every Wednesday, but the time and circumstances are not right for the card that we had planned next week for Blood and Guts. That show will happen when the time is right. But what you can count on instead this coming Wednesday is a great live episode featuring Chris Jericho confronting Matt Hardy face-to-face, one-on-one, for the first time ever, and a tremendous night of wrestling action. Now, he says it's not the right time for that card. He didn't just say the match. He said the card. So it makes me wonder if we're still getting that parking lot fight that they promoted between the Best Friends and the Lucha Bros. Or the lumberjack match between Wardlow and Luchasaurus. He almost made it sound like those matches might not be happening either. I'm fine with them delaying the Blood and Guts match. It's a match that deserves a hot crowd. But again, I'm also not going to shit on WWE for moving ahead with WrestleMania, because Tony Khan is taking a chance by doing this. Tony Khan, unlike WWE and what they're doing as we speak this weekend, AEW is not taping a whole bunch of shows in advance. You heard Tony Khan in that statement. They're prepared to go live every Wednesday from Jacksonville if they have to, and do one live show per week. WWE doesn't know what's going to be, so they're taping a whole bunch of shows. They're basically taping everything to cover the next 2 to 3 weeks, including WrestleMania. because they just don't know what's going to be, or maybe they just want to be able to send people home and not make it so that they have to keep flying into Orlando. But Tony Khan is taking a chance by doing this. If things continue to be bad and the live crowds are not able to come back to the arenas for another 6 months or worse, if this carries over into next year, that's a long time to delay that blood and guts match. And to keep this feud fresh and to keep this feud going between the Inner Circle and the Elite. They're taking a chance by doing that. I would have been okay with Vince McMahon postponing WrestleMania, but I also understand him wanting to get it done now. Tony Khan made the opposite call. He decided however long it takes, that match needs to happen in front of a live audience. And I respect his decision. It's worth noting that the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, which is the scheduled site for the Double or Nothing pay-per-view, Memorial Day weekend, is one of the many MGM properties that have suspended operations until further notice with everything going on. So that's another show that's in jeopardy right now. It's not looking too good for Double or Nothing, unless they move that to Jacksonville too.